This happened on Christmas Day 2 years ago, and every December since then, it plays in my head like a movie I never asked to be in. I was 17 that year, living with my parents in a nice little subdivision in Oregon. That Christmas was picture perfect. Fresh snow, blue sky in the morning, and that soft pink glow as the sun went down. Inside, though, it was chaos. My family goes huge for Christmas. I'm talking about cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. Everybody stuffed into our house like clowns in a car. Kids running around with frosting on their faces. My grandma yelling at my uncle about putting too much salt in the gravy. And random Christmas movies playing in the background with the volume too low to actually hear. I'm the emo antisocial one in the family, so most of the day I just floated around the edges. I helped put food out, faked laugh at small talk, and hid in the kitchen whenever I could. That's where I was when I first saw him. My cousin Jenna walked in with a guy nobody had ever seen before. She was glowing in a way that girls get when they bring a new boyfriend around. He was older, mid-30s easily. Too old for her in my opinion. He had this short beard, slicked hair, and a Christmas sweater that would have looked normal on anyone else but looked like a costume on him. The first thing I noticed was his eyes. He didn't scan the room like a normal person does. He locked onto me. I was just standing there by the counter, slicing store-bought pumpkin pie, and felt his gaze hit me like a spotlight. It wasn't a curious look. It wasn't even a, "oh, who's that?" It felt like I was being sized up. I looked away, busying myself with my plate. "This is Dave," Jenna said, dragging him over to my mom. We've been dating for a couple of months. My mom did her usual thing. Hug, smile, "nice to meet you, welcome to the madhouse." Everybody laughed. He laughed too, but it sounded off, like he'd practiced it. I kept my head down, but every time I glanced up, he was watching me. Later, when everybody was in the living room, opening gifts, I sat on the floor by the far wall, half behind the tree, scrolling through my phone with my headphones on, but no music playing. I saw him move through the room, talking to different people, laughing and shaking hands. But he circled back to me, over and over. He'd stand just close enough that I knew he was there. Then he'd lean down, pretend to be interested in something near me, and start a conversation. "So, you're Jenna's cousin?" he asked at one point, kneeling next to me like we were buddies. I could smell cheap cologne and something sour underneath it. "Yeah," I said. "You look different from the rest of them," he said, eyes drifting over my clothes, my hair and my face. "In a good way. I like your style." Yup, I knew he was a creep all along. This is why I don't care when people judge me for always trusting my gut. I didn't answer. I moved to sit with my younger cousins instead, pretending to help them open toys, but he followed. Every time I relocated, to the kitchen, to the hallway, to the dining room, he'd appear a few minutes later. He kept trying to joke with me, calling me mysterious and other weird corny things, asking me if I had a boyfriend, what kind of music I liked, and if I ever snuck out at night. Stuff that might sound normal if somebody your own age said it, but straight up wrong coming from a guy pushing 40. The final straw was when everybody was grabbing dessert and I was alone in the hallway for a second, picking tape off my fingers from wrapping paper. He stepped in front of me, blocking the way, and smiled. "You know, you're going to be trouble when you're older," he said, eyes never leaving my face. "If you're not already." My stomach flipped. My mind instantly went to WTF. "I'm already older," I said, "and I'm not interested." He laughed quietly and leaned a little closer. "I didn't say you had to be interested to have fun." That's when I snapped out of my usual just ignore people mode. "If you don't back off," I said, looking him right in the eyes, "I'm telling my parents that you're creeping on me." For a second, his smile dropped, just gone. His eyes changed, like he was angry I'd said it out loud. Then he smirked and stepped back. "Relax," he said. "I'm just joking around, don't be so serious." After that, he mostly left me alone. He still stared sometimes, but he didn't corner me again. I told myself not to make it a bigger deal than it had to be. My cousin looked happy, the adults were laughing, and kids were running around showing off their new toys. I decided not to tell my parents. It was late, everybody was full and tired, and I didn't want to start some big family fight on Christmas. I brushed it off the way I always do. People started leaving around 9. There were hugs and drive safe and see you next year at the door. I watched from the stairs as Jenna and Dave left. He glanced up once, met my eyes, and gave me a little 2-finger wave, but I pretended not to see it. By 10:30, the house was quiet. My parents were cleaning up the kitchen, and I went upstairs to my room. Snow was still falling outside, thick and slow, and I was just thankful it was all over. My window faced the street, and the view honestly looked like something from a movie. I put on my headphones and put on some 3 Days Grace and flopped on my bed with a book I probably wasn't actually going to read. I turned the volume up, letting the music drown out the last thoughts and drama of family noise I had going through my head. That's why I wasn't sure at first if I actually heard it. A small tap on the glass behind my head. I paused the song, lay there listening. My heart picked up a little, but I told myself it was probably just a tree branch or something shifting in the wind. I turned the music back on. Maybe 5 minutes later, I heard it again. It was slightly louder, though. I sat up this time. My bed is pushed right up against the window, so the glass is basically the headboard. I turned around and looked at the window. It was fogged over from the difference between the warm air inside and the freezing air outside. Couldn't see anything except the fuzzy glow of one of the nearby streetlights. Probably nothing, I said to myself, even though I knew houses don't knock 3 times in a row. I'll admit I was freaked out, deep down, but I just wanted so badly to be overreacting that I eventually believed it. I slid off the bed and stood up, leaning closer. I wiped a circle in the condensation with the sleeve of my hoodie. First, all I could see was the street covered in snow. The sidewalks, the rows of houses across from ours, lights off except a few porch lights. Then I saw him. A figure standing on the sidewalk, down the street a little bit. He had a dark jacket on, jeans, and a posture slouched slightly, like he'd been standing there for a while. He was facing my house. His head was angled upward toward my window. Even from that distance, even in the dark, I recognized the outline. Dave. I dropped my sleeve from the glass like it was hot and stumbled backward. Heart pounding so hard I thought it would beat out of my chest. I grabbed the blinds and yanked them shut, then shut off my lamp so the room went dark. I stood there for a minute, pressed against the wall, listening. I considered going downstairs and telling my parents right then, but some stubborn part of me said, what if you're overreacting? What if it's not even him? The idea of explaining, hey, that guy who creeped me out earlier is standing on our street, felt insane. So I watched. For the next 20 or 30 minutes, I sneaked to the edge of the blinds, lift one slat and peek out. Most times I saw nothing but swirling snow. Sometimes I thought I saw movement, but it was probably just flakes catching the light. Eventually, the sidewalk looked empty. The panic dulled the nervous energy. I told myself he'd left, that it really was just my imagination or some random neighbor walking their dog earlier. Who knows? I went back to my bed, turned on my lamp again, and tried to actually read my book. Headphones sat around my neck, music off this time. I think it was close to midnight when it happened. A sudden violent bang against the window right above my head. The glass rattled, and the sound was so loud and so close that I screamed without even meaning to. It wasn't a tap this time. It was both hands slamming into the glass. Hey, a muffled voice called through the window, way too close. Open up. I scrambled off the bed, my legs almost giving out, and bolted for the door. I didn't even stop to look. I didn't want to see his face that close on the other side of the glass. My whole body was shaking as I yanked my bedroom door open and sprinted down the hall. I ran out of my room and started yelling, Dad, my voice cracking. Somebody's at my window. My dad came out of his room at the same time my mom did, both of them half asleep and confused. The look on my face must have told them that this wasn't a joke. My dad didn't ask more than, where? And I just pointed toward my room. Stay with your mom, he said, already heading down the stairs. I watched from the top as he went to the gun safe in the hallway closet, punched in the code with shaking fingers, and grabbed his handgun and a flashlight. He didn't even bother with a coat, just his pajama pants and a t-shirt. He went out the back door instead of the front, probably hoping to catch whoever it was off guard. My mom had her phone out, hands trembling as she dialed 911. I stood by the upstairs window in the hallway, peeking through the blinds that looked out over the backyard. The world outside was white and dark and silent. Then my dad's flashlight beam cut across the yard. It landed on a figure standing a few feet from my bedroom window. Dave. He was just standing there. No hat, no gloves, breath fogging in the air. When the light hit him, he squinted and lifted a hand like the brightness annoyed him more than being caught did. What the hell are you doing here? My dad shouted. Even through the glass, I heard Dave's answer. I'm sorry, man, he said, like he'd misplaced a phone, not stalked a teenage girl. I don't know, I needed to talk to her. My dad moved closer, gun pointed down but ready. Talk to my daughter, at midnight, at her bedroom window. Dave laughed softly, that same fake laugh from earlier in the day. She's special. I love her, and I want to marry her. You can sign for it, right? Parent consent, that's all it takes. My mom gasped beside me, hand flying to her mouth. My dad snapped. Get on the ground. You absolute psycho, he yelled. Now. Dave shook his head like my dad was being unreasonable. You don't understand. She gets it. My dad lunged. The flashlight beam jerked wildly as he tackled Dave into the snow. I lost sight of them for a second and just heard grunts and the crunch of boots and knees digging into the frozen ground. Then the light settled and I could see my dad on top of him, pinning his arms behind his back with his knee. Call the cops, he shouted, though my mom already was. The next few minutes felt like an hour. My dad stayed on him, not letting him move, barking at him to shut up every time he tried to talk. I caught pieces of what Dave said, stuff about meant to be and she's different and Christmas miracle. It made my skin crawl. When the police finally pulled up, lights flashing blue and red across the snow, my legs almost gave out from relief. 2 officers ran into the yard, shouting commands. My dad got off him slowly, hands raised, explaining who he was. They cuffed Dave, patted him down, and pulled stuff from his pockets. I watched from the window as they set things on the hood of the patrol car. Little plastic baggies, condoms, more than one knife, a stack of IDs with different names and pictures. One of the officers noticed me staring from the window and gave me a quick serious nod, the kind of nod that said, you did the right thing. Dave was trespassed from our property and taken away that night. We gave statements until almost 3 in the morning. I heard bits and pieces later. Meth, fake IDs, warrants, but I never found out the full story of what happened to him in court. What I do know is this. If he waited until my parents went to sleep, if I'd opened the window even an inch, if I'd kept second-guessing myself instead of screaming and running for my dad, this might be a completely different story. And yes, for those wondering, my cousin broke up with him immediately and cut off all contact. This happened on Christmas, years ago, and it ruined Secret Santa for me forever. I was 24 at the time, working at a mid-sized office in the city. Nothing special at all. Cubicles, those fluorescent lights, and break room coffee that always tasted mid. The only thing people actually seemed excited about was the annual Secret Santa. I'd only been there about a year, so I signed up mostly because I didn't want to be the weird one who didn't participate. We all pulled names out of a bowl. I got some guy from accounting I barely knew. I figured I'd grab him a mug and some candy and call it a day. A few days later, the gifts started showing up. My first Secret Santa gift was normal. I came in one morning and found a little red bag on my desk. Inside was a Starbucks gift card and some chocolates. The tag said, "For the one who always looks tired. Merry Christmas." Kind of rude, kind of funny. Everybody joked about their gifts. People were posting pictures of them in our group chat. It felt harmless. Around that same week, we got a new hire. He introduced himself as Evan. Tall, mid-30s, and kind of plain. He wore a blue button-up, black slacks, and one of those generic office ID badges on a lanyard. My manager walked him over to the row of cubicles near mine, and the guy said he'd be helping out on the client side for the end-of-the-year rush. He seemed friendly enough. Asked the usual questions. How long had I been there? Did I like it? Where was the bathroom, and where was the good coffee? But there was something about him I didn't like. He watched people more than he talked to them. He always seemed to be listening, just from out of view. I told myself I was being paranoid, though. A few days later, I stayed late to finish some reports. It was dark when I finally shut down my computer, and most of the office was empty. I rode the elevator down to the parking garage. My car was parked in one of the corners. As I walked toward it, I noticed something on the windshield. A small, neatly wrapped present. My stomach dropped a little. I looked around first. Just rows of parked cars and the exit ramp. I picked up the box. The tag had my name on it in neat handwriting. Inside was a pair of fuzzy gloves and a note. You shouldn't walk to your car alone so late. Someone has to look out for you. Signed, your Secret Santa. My chest tightened. Secret Santa was supposed to happen during office hours, on desks, in the break room, not in a mostly empty garage where I walked alone. The next day, I mentioned it to a couple of coworkers. They laughed it off. One said, "Wow, your Secret Santa's got game," and another said, "At least yours pays attention." I laughed along, but it didn't feel funny. The second time it happened, it wasn't cute at all. A week before Christmas, I stayed late again. I told myself I wouldn't, but end-of-year deadlines didn't care how creeped out I was. The garage was even emptier this time. Only a few scattered cars, and the lights seemed dimmer than usual. When I got to my car, there was nothing on the windshield. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, unlocked the door, and got in. When I sat down, I saw it. A small red box sitting on the passenger seat. I always lock my car. Always. I looked around quickly, heart racing, then locked the doors again from the inside, even though that wasn't going to fix anything. My hands were shaking as I opened the box. There was no gift inside this time, just a note folded in half. You really need to be more careful. It was too easy to get in here. I drove home with my heart thumping, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The next morning, I went straight to HR. I told them about the weird gifts I've been getting, and the note. I didn't say stalker, but I didn't have to. The HR lady's face tightened as she listened. She said she'd talk to security and review the cameras. On my way out of her office, I passed Evan in the hallway. He smiled at me. Rough morning? He asked casually. Yeah, I muttered. You got home safe last night, right? He asked. I stopped. What? He shrugged. You mentioned you were staying late. Roads were icy. Just asking. I hadn't told him anything about staying late. Something about that clicked in my brain. I walked straight into my manager's office instead of my desk. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. That new guy, Evan, how long is he contracting for? My manager gave me a blank look. Who? The guy you introduced to our row last week. Tall, dark hair, badge, sits by the front window. She frowned, thinking, we don't have any new hires on your side. Not this month. I laughed nervously. No, I mean the guy you showed around. He said that he was here to help with client stuff. I've been out of the office for 3 days for meetings, she said. I haven't shown anybody around. That's when my stomach really dropped. I went back to HR. They checked the visitor log. Nobody named Evan. The badge he wore should have had a number. There's no record of it. Security said they'd pull footage from the garage and entrances. For the rest of the day, I kept catching glimpses of him. In the hallway, in the break room, near the elevators. Always just passing by. Always watching. By the time I left, I was shaking. I got off the elevator in the garage and stood there for a second, listening. My car sat where it always did, slightly crooked between the lines. This time, there was a bigger box on the hood. I didn't touch it with my bare hands. I unlocked my car from a distance, grabbed the box with my shirt, tossed it into the passenger side, got in, and sped out of there. I didn't open it until it was in my apartment with the door locked, the chain on and every light on. Inside was a USB drive and a small folded note. My hand shook as I opened the note. Open this. Merry Christmas. I plugged the USB into my laptop. There were multiple video files. I clicked the first one. It was grainy security-style footage of me walking through the garage. Different nights, different outfits. Sometimes I was on my phone, sometimes digging through my bag, and sometimes looking around nervously. The camera wasn't from an overhead security cam. It was at a ground level, hidden behind concrete, peeking around pillars, and always a little too close. In one video, I walked right past the camera. For a split second, my face filled the frame. I flinched while watching it. The last video literally made my skin crawl. It was filmed from behind a car across from mine, angled so you could see both my car and the entrance to the garage elevator. The timestamp in the corner was from tonight, like 10 minutes earlier. The video showed my car sitting alone. Then in the distance, the elevator doors opened and I stepped out. I could see myself looking around, pulling my coat tighter and hesitating. The camera stayed low, unmoving, like whoever was recording was crouched behind something, waiting. At the end of the clip, you could hear breathing close to the mic, then a whisper. You never say goodnight when you leave. I ripped the USB out so fast my laptop chimed in error. My heart was hammering. For a second, I just stood there in my living room, shaking, feeling like I was being watched, even though my blinds were closed. I was reaching for my phone to call 911 when somebody knocked on my front door. Not like a normal knock. It was super hard, uneven pounding. 3 hits. Pause. 2 hits. Another hit. Like whoever it was couldn't stand still. Time stood still. The knocking came again. Hello, a man's voice called. Hey, it's me, from work. I need help. I didn't move, didn't answer. He kept talking through the door. I got jumped, he said, sounding breathless. They stole my car. My phone's gone. I didn't know where else to go. Please, I know you live near the office. I followed you once we left. Please, just let me use your phone. My stomach twisted. I looked through the people. It was him. Evan stood on my porch, shoulders hunched, one hand on the doorframe. There was blood on his forehead and running down his cheek, or at least it looked like blood. His shirt was ripped. He kept glancing over his shoulder like something might be chasing him. "Come on," he said, voice cracking. "Please, I'm freezing out here." Every instinct in me screamed to keep the door locked. I backed away from it. "I'm calling the police," I said, trying to sound steady. "They can help you." His tone changed in an instant. "You don't need to do that," he said. The desperation dropped out of his voice. "Just let me in. I know you're alone. I've watched you come home." My skin went cold. He hit the door with the side of his fist. "Open the door." I ran to grab my phone, but I'd barely turned my back when it happened. He started kicking as hard as he could and ran into it with his shoulder. The door finally burst inward. I stumbled and dropped my phone as he shoved his way inside, slamming the door behind him with his heel. He was breathing hard, eyes wide, but there was no fear in them, just this bright, excited look. "See," he said. "Now we don't have to shout through the door." I tried to run for the kitchen, but he was faster. He grabbed the back of my shirt and yanked me toward the living room. I scratched at his hands, kicked backward, anything. He dragged me a few feet before I twisted free and spun toward him. That's when he grabbed a picture frame off the TV stand. It was a family photo from a few years ago in a solid wood frame. He swung it like a club, catching me on the side of the head. White flashed in my vision. I hit the floor, ears ringing, and everything spinning. The frame shattered beside my face, glass scattering under my cheek. I felt his weight drop on me a second later, fingers clawing at my arms, trying to pin them above my head. "You weren't supposed to run," he hissed. I was trying to be nice. I thrashed under him, half dizzy, grabbing at anything I could reach. My hand landed on a shard of broken glass, and I squeezed it without thinking, slicing through my palm. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing until I dropped it. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled my knees up as hard as I could and kicked straight between his legs. Perfect nutshot. He made a sound that I'll never forget. His grip loosened instantly. He toppled sideways, clutching himself. I scrambled out from under him, slipped on the glass, and sprinted for the door. My vision was still tilted, my head throbbing, but adrenaline dragged me forward. I didn't stop to grab my phone. I didn't put on shoes. I yanked the broken door open and ran out into the cold. The air outside hit me like ice. I bolted across my small front yard and straight to my neighbor's house, pounding on their door like my life depended on it. They opened it after what felt like an eternity, but was probably 10 seconds. I practically fell inside. My neighbor's eyes went huge when she saw the blood on my face and hands. "Call 911, I gasped. "Please," he broke in. "He's in my house." Her husband locked the door and peered through the window while she dialed. He watched my house from across the street. By the time the police got there, he was gone. They cleared my place room by room. The front door was busted. The picture frame was smashed and there was a bunch of blood on the floor. The USB was still on the coffee table and my laptop was open. He left the same way he came in and vanished into the night, but they never found him. The company tightened security after that. New badges, new cameras, and no more Secret Santa for a while. HR said they think he'd been getting in by following employees through the lobby and using a cloned access card. I took a couple of weeks off, then eventually quit. I couldn't walk through that parking garage again without feeling like somebody was waiting behind every pillar. This year, people keep asking me if I miss doing Secret Santa at work. I just smile and say I'm over that kind of thing. What I don't say is that every time I see a little wrapped box or walk through a garage alone, or hear a knock at my door after dark, I remember his voice on that video whispering that I never said goodnight, and I remember how close I came to never seeing another Christmas at all. This happened on Christmas Eve 2 years ago, and I still can't hear a knock at the door after dark without my stomach dropping. I was 26 at the time, freshly back in my hometown after moving out of an apartment with my ex. My parents had gone to Florida to spend Christmas with my sister and her kids, and I'd volunteered to stay behind and watch the house, water the plants, and make sure the pipes didn't freeze. It's one of those quiet suburban streets where every house has the same plastic candy canes along the walkway, the same glowing reindeer on the lawn, and the same wreath on the door. My parents go all out every year. Their front bushes were wrapped in lights. There was a glowing Merry Christmas sign on the window, and inside the place looked like a Hallmark set. Tree in the corner, stockings on the mantle, cinnamon candle burning on the coffee table. It felt cozy and safe. That night, I did what I always do when I'm alone on holidays. I tried to pretend it didn't bother me. I made myself a frozen pizza, poured a couple glasses of wine, and put on a Christmas movie marathon. I FaceTimed my parents for a bit, held the phone up to the tree so my mom could gush over the ornaments, and then they went back to their warm rental in Florida, and I went back to my quiet living room in the Michigan cold. By 9:30, it was snowing steadily. The street outside was dead. No cars passing, no kids playing. Just that muffled silence you only get during a snowstorm. That's when my phone buzzed. A text message. "Package delivered," the notification said. I frowned because I hadn't ordered anything. I opened the message all the way. It showed a blurry night photo of a front porch. My parents' front porch. I hadn't heard the doorbell, but sometimes delivery drivers don't ring it, so I shrugged it off, slipped on my slippers, and went to the front hall. I flicked on the porch light and looked through the peephole. There was no package. Just a man. He was standing on the porch facing slightly away from the door, hood up, shoulders dusted with snow. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just relatively dark clothing and work boots. One gloved hand was in his pocket, the other was holding his phone screen, glowing blue against his beard. As soon as I looked, he turned like he somehow felt it. He smiled and stepped closer to the door. I stepped back from instinct, even though there was still a solid door between us. The doorbell rang. He jabbed it like 3 or 4 times rapidly. I cleared my throat. Can I help you?" I called through the door. "Yeah, package for, I heard paper crinkle. "For Miller? This address, right? Must have gone to the wrong house. Just need a signature." My parents' last name is Miller, but I never told him that. "That's okay," I said. "You can just leave it." He laughed softly. It didn't sound like a delivery guy's laugh, if that makes sense. It sounded annoyed. "Come on, man. It's alcohol. I need a signature. You don't want this going back to the warehouse, trust me." Something about the way he said warehouse made my skin crawl. No company name, no tablet, no clearly visible package. "I'm good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've got the wrong house." Then his tone changed. Not angry, but like flatter. "Alright," he said. "Merry Christmas then." I heard footsteps retreat down the porch steps. I waited a good 30 seconds, then peeked through the peephole again. He was still there. Not on the porch, but in the yard now, standing by our little light-up reindeer. He had his back to the house, head turned toward the street like he was watching or waiting for something. The porch light only caught the edge of his face, but I could see enough to tell he wasn't actually looking at the decorations. He was watching the houses. Watching which ones were dark, which ones were full. It was hard to say at the time, but it felt weird. I backed away from the door. For a few seconds, I considered calling the non-emergency police line, but it felt stupid. Guy standing outside doesn't sound that serious when you try to explain it. I told myself that he was just some sketchy private courier, turned off the foyer light, and went back to the couch. The movie played on, but I wasn't really watching anymore. Every now and then I muted it and listened. Nothing out of the ordinary. By 11 o'clock, I decided I freaked myself out enough. I did a quick walkthrough of the house, checked the back sliding door, the kitchen door to the garage, and the windows. Locked. All good. I turned off the lights downstairs, leaving only the Christmas tree on, and went upstairs to the guest room I'd been sleeping in. Lying in bed, scrolling my phone, I kind of convinced myself I'd overreacted. People stand outside sometimes. Not everybody is a serial killer just because their jacket isn't branded, I guess. I eventually dozed off. I don't know how long I was asleep when I woke up to a sound that, at first, my half-dreaming brain tried to explain away. Like something metal lightly hitting glass. Distant, dull, but inside the house. I held my breath. The house settled. The heater kicked on. Nothing else. I checked my phone at about 1:43 a.m., I think. I told myself it was just the heater or ice shifting on the roof. Rolled over and closed my eyes. Until I heard it again. This time with a scratch as well. I knew now it was undeniably from downstairs, and close, not through a wall. All the drowsiness vanished. I sat up, every sense suddenly tuned in. I could see the faint glow of the tree reflecting up the stairwell from under my door, so I knew the living room was still lit. I swung my legs out of bed and stood as quietly as I could, padding over to the door in my socks. I gently pressed my ear against it. For a few seconds, I heard nothing. Then, very clearly, the unmistakable sound of the backsliding door, shaking. The vertical blinds rattled softly. Then a hard, subtle thumping as somebody tested the lock from outside. My heart started racing in that sickening way where it feels like it's beating against your throat. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't go down there," so I didn't. I backed away from the door, grabbed my phone off the nightstand, and dialed 911, shaking. The operator answered, and I did my best to keep my voice low. "Somebody's trying to get into my house," I whispered. "From the back door. I'm upstairs." She asked my address, my name, and if I was alone. I told her. I could hear her typing, her voice calm. "Stay on the line with me, okay? Officers are on the way." Downstairs, the rattling stopped. For a few seconds, the silence was worse. Then came a new sound, a dull thud like a shoulder hitting the door. Once, twice, then something else. Metal scraping. Tools, I thought. "Sir, are you in a locked room?" the operator asked. "Yes, upstairs bedroom, door's locked." "Good, stay there, don't confront them." I wanted to say, "No worries, I'm not a hero," but my mouth was dry. One more heavy thud echoed through the house, then an awful cracking noise. Wood maybe, or plastic, I didn't know. But the next sound I recognized instantly. The subtle rubbery whoosh of the sliding door opening. The house went still after that in a way that was somehow even more terrifying than the noise. The heater clicked off, and I could hear nothing but the dispatcher and my own breathing. Then, finally, footsteps. Not trying to be quiet, but not stomping either. They crossed the tile in the kitchen, then transitioned onto the wood in the dining room. Every step got a little clearer as they moved toward the living room. I could picture it in my head. That guy from the porch standing in front of the glowing tree, looking at the presents under it, looking at the family photos on the wall, looking up the stairs. "I hear footsteps inside," I whispered. "They're almost there," the operator said. "Just stay calm and hidden." I moved away from the door and into the walk-in closet attached to the guest room. It was packed with my mom's old clothes, extra blankets, and boxes of decorations. I squeezed myself into the far corner, behind a hanging row of coats, and tried to breathe quietly. Below me, a drawer slid open. Something dropped. The footsteps moved closer to the base of the stairs. Each step up the staircase sounded heavier than the last. The wood creaked in that specific way I recognized from growing up in that house. Whoever was on the stairs was big. He paused about halfway up. For a second, I thought maybe he was listening. My phone screen was glowing faintly in my hands. I turned it face down and held my breath. The steps resumed, getting closer. Then I heard this slight shift, an echo that told me he'd reached the top of the stairs and turned into the hallway, right outside the bedroom door. The doorknob jiggled. He tried it once and twice. Then a quiet chuckle. "Really?" a man's voice said softly, like he was talking to himself. The knob jiggled harder, and there was a sharp bang as he threw his shoulder into it. The thin hollow corridor shuddered in his frame. I thought it would give. I flinched and almost dropped my phone. "Sir," the operator whispered in my ear, "are they at your door?" "Yes," I mouthed more than I spoke. "Officers are close. You're doing good. Just stay where you are." Another hit. The door groaned. One of the hinges made a tiny popping sound. This wasn't going to hold forever. In that moment, I genuinely thought, I might have to fight this guy. I looked around the dark closet. There was nothing remotely weapon-like, except maybe a metal clothes rod, but it was bolted into the wall. My eyes landed on a heavy snow boot on the floor, and my brain offered up the brilliant suggestion of throwing it at him. I almost laughed from the adrenaline. The man paused between hits, and I heard him breathing on the other side of the door. We were maybe 6 feet apart, with an inch of wood separating us. Then, faint and far away at first, I heard it. Sirens. The man heard them too. There was a muttered curse, then hurried footsteps down the hall, pounding down the stairs and the slam of the sliding door. "Sirens," I whispered. "Yes, that's them," the operator said. "They're outside. Stay put until an officer tells you it's safe to come out." I heard multiple voices outside, then pounding on the front door. "This is the police. Anyone inside, call out now." I finally stepped out of the closet, legs shaking so badly I had to steady myself on the dresser. I opened the bedroom door carefully. It stuck halfway. The frame splintered where the man had hit it, but it opened enough for me to squeeze out. I crept to the top of the stairs, hands up, and called out, "I'm upstairs. I live here." 2 officers came into view in the living room, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping. They holstered them when they saw I was alone and clearly not the guy they were looking for. Downstairs, the living room looked strangely violated. The tree was still glowing peacefully, but the sliding door at the back of the house was standing half open, cold air pouring in. The lock had been pried clean off, the frame chipped and shredded. Wet boot prints led from the deck to the kitchen, across the floor to the base of the stairs. They walked me through the house while other officers checked around the property. Nothing obvious was missing. My laptop was still on the coffee table. The TV was on the wall and my wallet was upstairs. But in the kitchen, one drawer was left open. That's where my dad keeps the knives. One was missing. That was probably the worst part to find out. Later, when everything settled down and the adrenaline gave way to exhaustion, one of the officers told me there had been a string of Christmas Eve burglaries the last couple of years. Houses that were clearly decorated, clearly had gifts, and looked empty. A lot of them had older folks living there who were out of town visiting family. You probably saw your parents leave and assumed the place would be vacant all week, the officer said. Saw the lights. Maybe watched the house for a while. Wrong place, wrong time for him that you stayed. I thought about the guy on the porch with the fake package, testing to see if anyone would open up. The time delivery notification. The fact that he knew the last name before I'd ever confirmed it. I also thought about how easy it would have been to just crack the door, sign some fake form, and let him put one foot inside. To this day, I'm grateful I didn't. My parents replaced the door, added cameras, and got a security system. They double-check every lock religiously now. I still house sit for them, but I don't try to play it cool anymore. If anything feels off, I call somebody. I check the cameras. I turn on more lights than I probably need. And every Christmas Eve, when the street goes quiet and the snow deadens every sound, I always find myself listening once the movies are off and the house is dark.